massage. A sprain. He had twisted something at soccer practice, nothing major. He came home sore, wincing, asking if I had anything to help with the pain. Just a little knot, he said. He was my stepson, my husband's child from his first marriage. I had been in his life since he was 11. And now, he was 18, practically grown. Taller than me, stronger than me, but still my boy. Still family. So when he asked, of course I said yes. Of course I got the lotion. Of course I offered to help. Because that's what you do for someone you care about, right? That's what I told myself. What I didn't tell myself, not at first, was how long it had been since anyone had touched me. Since anyone had looked at me the way he did when I walked into the room. Since anyone had made me feel seen. My husband. He'd been cold for years. Distant. Present in body but never in spirit. Always working. Always tired. Always somewhere else, even when he was sitting right beside me. And so I started carrying my loneliness like a quiet weight. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when I needed to. And I told myself, this is just what marriage becomes after a while. Be grateful. But that day, that moment, when I sat on the edge of the couch and he turned his back to me, when I laid my hands on his shoulders and felt his warmth, something shifted. Not all at once. Not loudly. Not even clearly. It was like the softest click of a lock turning. Like something long buried inside of me blinked awake. And still, I told myself it was nothing. Just a massage. He had a sprained back. That's all it was. At first. But then he turned his head, just slightly, looked over his shoulder at me, and said something that made my breath catch. His voice was so soft, I almost missed it. He said, I wish you were mine. I froze. Every part of me just stopped. The room didn't move. The clock didn't tick. Even the air in my lungs held still. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I had heard. Was he joking? Was I imagining things? Or had something sacred just cracked beneath us? And in that split second, I realized this wasn't about a sore back. It never had been. It was about two people, starving in silence, reaching for something they weren't supposed to touch. And you know what scares me the most? It wasn't how wrong it was. It was how good it felt to be wanted, to be noticed, to be chosen. If you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. Because I didn't even know who I was anymore after that night. But I'm going to tell you everything. Not because I'm proud of it, but because sometimes the truth needs a voice, especially the kind no one else wants to speak out loud. So stay with me. Because what happened after that moment will change the way you look at love, at family, and at yourself. And if you're still here, still listening, thank you. It means you understand that not every story is clean or easy. Some are messy. Some are painful. Some are just real. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. These are the stories no one dares to tell, but everyone needs to hear. And believe me, you won't want to miss what comes next. I think the worst kind of loneliness is the kind that lives right inside your home. You go through the motions, wake up, make breakfast, clean the kitchen, do laundry, smile when someone walks in the room. Smile again when they walk right past you without a second glance. You start wondering if maybe this is just what marriage turns into. If this kind of emptiness is normal. I've been married for 12 years. And I can tell you, the silence didn't show up all at once. It crept in slowly. First, he stopped kissing me goodbye. Then he stopped asking how my day was. Eventually, he just stopped seeing me altogether. He was always working. Always tired. Always somewhere else. Physically, he was there. But emotionally, I was living with a stranger. A stranger who once held my hand under candlelight. A stranger who once made me laugh until I cried. I used to wonder if I was asking for too much. If wanting to be held, or complimented, or even looked at was selfish. So I stopped asking. Stopped needing. At least, that's what I told myself. But even silence echoes when it's loud enough. And in that silence, someone else was paying attention. Ethan. He's my husband's son from his first marriage. I met him when he was 11. Back then, he was just a lanky, shy kid with big eyes and a soft heart. We bonded quickly. Maybe because I always made time for him. Maybe because I saw a part of myself in him, quiet, thoughtful, always watching from the sidelines. As the years passed, he grew taller, stronger. His voice deepened. He filled out into his frame. But what never changed was the way he saw me. He noticed things. The way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was nervous. The way my eyes lingered too long on the dinner table, waiting for someone to ask how I was. He noticed when I changed my hair. He noticed when my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. He even noticed the night I cried over the sink, quietly, thinking everyone was asleep. And that's the thing, he never said anything in those moments. He just saw me. And when you've been invisible for long enough, being seen feels like oxygen. After his injury, just a small sprain from soccer, he started staying home more. The doctor told him to rest, and I made it my mission to take care of him. Not just because I felt responsible, but because, truthfully, I was grateful to have someone in the house who actually acknowledged me. We'd talk in the kitchen while I chopped vegetables, or sit in the living room watching old movies. At first, it felt harmless, comforting, familiar. But then there were little things. Like how he'd linger in the doorway a second too long. How his eyes would flicker to mine when he thought I wasn't looking. Or how he'd sit just a little closer on the couch than he used to. One evening, I was setting the table, and he walked in with a small potted plant. "Thought you'd like this," he said. "Figured the kitchen could use something alive." I smiled, because no one had brought me flowers, real or fake, in years. My husband didn't even remember our anniversary last year. And here was Ethan, thinking of me. That night, after dinner, my husband went straight to bed, as usual. Ethan stayed behind to help me with the dishes. And while we stood side by side, washing and drying, he said quietly, "I like when it's just us." It hit me in a strange way. Not inappropriate. Not yet. But intimate. Too intimate. I looked at him. His face was unreadable. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't trying to flirt. He just meant it. And I realized I liked it too. Not because I was trying to replace anything, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I mattered. Like I wasn't just a background character in my own home. Our house is beautiful. White walls. Big windows. A quiet neighborhood where you can hear the birds in the morning. From the outside, everything looks perfect. But inside, it's cold. Not the kind of cold you feel in your bones, the kind you feel in your heart. I filled the rooms with candles. I kept the shelves dusted. I made every meal with care. But no one noticed. Except him. Ethan would lean in while I cooked and say, "That smells amazing." Or he'd compliment my dress when no one else did. Not in a flirty way, just in a way that reminded me I was still a woman. Still someone worth seeing. I didn't know how badly I needed that, until it started happening. It was never about lust. Not at first. It was about connection. About being acknowledged. About two people, both neglected in their own way, orbiting the same quiet ache. And maybe that's what made it so dangerous. Because when you're starving, even crumbs can taste like a feast. Looking back, the signs were there. But I ignored them. Or maybe I didn't want to admit what they meant. Because admitting it would mean facing the truth I wasn't ready to say out loud. That maybe, just maybe, the safest place I'd found in years was in the eyes of someone I was never supposed to see that way. And that truth, that unbearable truth, was already starting to bloom. Even before he ever said a word. It happened on a Thursday. Ethan came home from practice limping, his face tight with pain. He tried to play it off like it was no big deal, but I could see it, how he winced when he sat down, how he shifted constantly trying to find a position that didn't hurt. I asked him what happened. He shrugged. Said I probably pulled something in my lower back. I offered to call the doctor. He shook his head. Already went to the school nurse. They said rest and heat should help. He looked tired. Not just physically, but in a way I recognized deep in my bones. That same kind of weariness I'd carried for years without saying a word. Later that night, while my husband was upstairs buried in some work meeting on Zoom, I found Ethan on the couch, lying awkwardly on his side, pressing a warm pack against his back. "You want some help?" I asked. He looked up, surprised. "Like, with a heat pad?" I hesitated, then said it. "I used to help your dad with back pain. I could give you a quick massage if you want. Might loosen it up." He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me. And then finally, with a quiet voice, said, "Yeah, I'd like that." I didn't think twice. I grabbed some lotion from the bathroom. Something unscented. Basic. Nothing fancy. I didn't dress differently. I didn't act differently. I was just me. He lay face down on the couch, shirt lifted just enough to expose the top of his back. The room was quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own thoughts too clearly. I sat beside him and placed my hands gently on his skin. Warm. Tense. He tensed slightly at first, but then I felt him exhale. "It's okay," I said softly. "Just tell me if it hurts." He nodded, and for a moment, it was nothing more than what it was supposed to be: comfort. Simple. Safe. But then, he flinched. Not dramatically. Just a quick shift, a sharp breath. His shirt rose higher, just a bit. And for a split second, my hand brushed over bare skin. His lower back, warm and smooth. I paused, not because it was wrong, but because I felt something. Not between us, no. Inside me. It was like touching something that wasn't supposed to stir, but did. I pulled my hand back slightly. "Too much pressure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," he said. Then quieter. "You're the only one who makes me feel cared for." My hands stopped moving. I looked at the back of his head. At his messy hair. At the way he didn't move or take it back. And I just sat there for a moment. Heart thudding. Mind racing. I wanted to believe it was just a casual comment. A throwaway sentence. But it wasn't. It was the way he said it. Like he was starving for affection. Like I was. It hit me like a mirror, his loneliness reflecting my own right back at me. And I didn't know what to do with that. I told myself to finish the massage. To focus. To breathe. So I reached for the lotion again, trying to steady my shaking fingers. I walked over to the counter where I'd left the bottle. And when I turned around, I caught him. Looking at me. Not just glancing. Not just watching. Looking. Like he was seeing something he wasn't supposed to. Like he wasn't just seeing me as his stepmother anymore. I held the bottle tight in my hand. Tighter than I needed to. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But in that second, we both knew something had shifted. Something we couldn't unsee. Something we couldn't unfeel. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining it. That I was being dramatic. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't just a massage anymore. And what scared me most was how much I didn't want it to stop. After that night, nothing between us looked different. We didn't talk about it. He didn't bring up what he said. I didn't mention the way he looked at me. But something had changed. Not out loud, but underneath. Quietly. Unspoken. Like a current running just beneath the surface. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. That sentence. "You're the only one who makes me feel cared for." I kept asking myself, was I reading too much into it? Was I so touch-starved, so emotionally hungry, that I twisted a simple moment into something it wasn't? Maybe he was just being sweet. Grateful. Maybe I was the problem. But that's the thing about loneliness, it plays tricks on your mind. It makes you second-guess every thought, every feeling. It makes you see hope in places where maybe there shouldn't be any. And yet, part of me wanted to believe it wasn't all in my head. Because the way he looked at me, that wasn't imagined. The stillness in the room, the weight of the silence, that was real. And the way I felt, that wasn't a lie. I tried to shake it off. Tried to act normal. But I couldn't unfeel it. I couldn't go back to being invisible after someone had looked at me like I mattered. So I started doing little things. Things I hadn't done in years. I took a little extra time getting ready in the morning. Not for anyone, just to feel something. I put on perfume again. Dug out that soft blouse I used to love, the one that always made me feel a little more alive. It wasn't a conscious plan. It wasn't about seduction or games. It was about me. trying to remember who I used to be before I became someone's afterthought. And Ethan. He noticed. He'd smile when I walked into the room. He'd pause mid-conversation and say, "You look nice today." Or, "That color really suits you." Simple words. Small comments. But to me, they felt like oxygen. My husband hadn't complimented me in years. Not once. He'd walk through the door, toss his keys on the table, and barely look in my direction. Sometimes I'd stand there, right in front of him, wearing something new, hair done, makeup fresh, and he'd just walk past me. Like I was the wallpaper. It used to hurt. Then I got used to it. Then I stopped trying altogether. But now? Now someone was noticing again. And I hated how much I craved that. I'd be folding laundry and suddenly wonder, was I smiling too much when Ethan walked into the room? Was I laughing a little too loud at his jokes? Was I leaning in closer than I used to? Every night, I'd lie awake in bed next to a man who hadn't touched me in months, while downstairs slept someone who saw me more clearly in one glance than my husband had in years. And it tore me apart. Because I knew how it sounded. I knew how it looked. But it didn't feel like betrayal. Not yet. It felt like finally being seen. It felt like recognition. And that scared me more than anything. Because if something as small as a compliment could make me feel this alive, what did that say about how empty I'd become? Some days, I convinced myself I was imagining everything. That I was just lonely. That this was all one-sided. That he didn't really mean anything by it. But then he'd say something small. Something soft. And I'd feel that warmth again. That dangerous, aching warmth. I started catching myself daydreaming. Not about anything specific. Just about feeling wanted. And I hated myself for it. Because I had a husband. A home. A role to play. I was the adult. The caretaker. The wife. The mother figure. But all I could think was, what if I've been asleep for so long? I forgot what it means to be awake? Was I just projecting? Was I trying to find something where there was nothing? Or had I finally stumbled into the truth I'd been too scared to admit? That maybe I was more than just starved for attention. Maybe I was starting to fall into something I couldn't climb out of. The first time I offered to help with his back. I thought it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. A few days later, he came into the kitchen holding his side, wincing slightly. Said it still hurt, especially after sleeping wrong. I nodded. And just like that, it became a routine. Late evenings, when the house was quiet. The TV humming in the background. The lights low. He'd lay down on the couch, and I'd rub the tension out of his shoulders. It always started the same way, innocent. Focused. Motherly even. But slowly, it changed. Not in obvious ways. Not in anything either of us said. It was in the air. In the space between our words. In the way he'd close his eyes and breathe a little deeper when my hands lingered longer than necessary. In the way my fingers slowed down, tracing the shape of his muscles, softer than they should have. I started avoiding his eyes. Because looking at him felt like holding my breath underwater. But he never looked away. Not once. He held my gaze like it meant something. Like he was waiting for me to say something I didn't have the courage to say. One night, after I finished, I rested my hand on his arm just for a second before pulling away. He grabbed it. Gently. Didn't let go. Just held it. And in that stillness, he looked up at me and asked, "Do you ever wish things were different?" I didn't know how to answer. So I didn't. But he kept going. Like, that you were with someone who saw you? That word, saw, it hit me harder than anything else he could have said. Because he did. He saw me. He saw the tiredness behind my eyes. The longing I tried to hide behind small talk and chores. He saw the way I forced smiles around his father. The way I hesitated before answering questions because I knew no one was really listening. And more than that, he made me feel seen. After that night, things kept building. He started helping around the house more. Not because I asked. But because he wanted to. He'd bring in the groceries without being told. He'd make me tea in the afternoons, sliding it quietly across the counter with a small smile. He'd sit with me while I cooked, asking how my day was, really listening. He'd share things, too. Things he never told his father. Things about school, about friends, about how lost he sometimes felt. And I listened. Because no one else was listening to me either. We became each other's safe space. And it was terrifying. Because nothing between us was wrong. But everything about it felt dangerous. He never said anything inappropriate. Never made a move. Never crossed the line. But it was the silence. The things neither of us said. The way we danced around the truth, afraid to break the spell. I'd tell myself to pull away. To create distance. To stop the massages, stop the conversations, stop the whatever this was before it became something we couldn't undo. But then I'd see him wince walking through the door. Or find another cup of tea waiting for me on the counter. Or hear his voice behind me saying, "Rough day," with that soft concern in his eyes. And suddenly, every line I meant to draw felt so far behind me. I started questioning myself constantly. Was I craving attention or connection? Was I lonely or was I selfish? Was this care, or something I couldn't admit even to myself? And through it all, I kept convincing myself we hadn't crossed a line. That so long as we stayed quiet, stayed careful, we were still safe. Until that one night. He walked into the kitchen, slower than usual. Said the pain had moved. Lower. He gestured vaguely, toward his hip. His lower back. His waistline. Asked if I could help. And I froze. Because he wasn't asking like a child. He wasn't asking like a patient. He was asking like a man. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I looked at him, and he didn't look away. He just waited. Waited for my answer. Waited to see if I would go one step further. One step closer to something we could never take back. It was raining that night. Not a soft drizzle, the kind that makes you want to curl up under a blanket, but a heavy, endless downpour. One of those nights where the sky feels like it's falling in pieces. Where everything is just louder. The wind. The water. The silence. My husband was out of town. Business trip. 3 nights in Denver. He barely said goodbye. A kiss on the cheek. No eye contact. Not even a text after he landed. The house felt even bigger without him there. And somehow, even colder. I was upstairs reading when I heard Ethan come in. His footsteps were slower than usual. He called out, said his back was killing him again. Said the rain made it worse, tightened everything. He didn't ask me outright. Just stood there in the hallway, damp hoodie clinging to him, pain written across his face. "I can't sleep like this," he mumbled. "It's all down here now." He gestured to his lower back. His hips. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed, "Don't. Just say goodnight. Just tell him to take a warm shower and stretch." But then I looked at him. At the tension in his body. At the exhaustion in his eyes. And something inside me softened. Or maybe it broke. I still don't know which. "Okay," I said quietly. "Just for a little bit." He followed me into the living room. I grabbed the lotion without thinking. Like muscle memory. Routine. But nothing about this felt routine. He laid down on his stomach, his shirt already off. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock, and the rain slamming against the windows. I sat beside him, hands trembling slightly. I told myself it was just another massage. That I was helping. That it didn't mean anything. But the second my hands touched his skin, I knew I was lying to myself. He was warm. So warm. His muscles were tight, strained. I worked slowly, gently, focusing on the movement, avoiding everything else. He didn't speak. Just breathed. Deep, slow breaths. And then, he placed his hand on mine. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't forceful. It was quiet. Like a question. I froze. Every thought in my head shut off. Every part of me stilled. I should have pulled away. I wanted to pull away. But I didn't. I just stayed there. Hands still resting against his skin. His hand resting on mine. We sat like that for what felt like forever. Not moving. Not speaking. Just feeling. And then, he turned. Slowly. Carefully. Until he was lying on his side, facing me. His eyes met mine. Raw. Unshielded. "Why do we have to pretend?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't seductive. It was sad. Honest. I opened my mouth. But no sound came out at first. He waited. Because I finally whispered, "It's wrong." He nodded. But he didn't move away. Didn't break eye contact. Instead, he reached out. Not to grab me. Not to pull me in. Just to touch, lightly, my face. The back of his fingers against my cheek. I closed my eyes. Because everything inside me was screaming. Because I couldn't look at him another second without falling apart. When I opened them again, he was still there. Closer now. So close I could feel his breath. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We just existed, together, in that fragile space between want and ruin. And for one suspended moment, time stopped. The rain kept falling. The wind howled outside. But in that room, everything was still. The line between us didn't blur that night. It disappeared. The morning after, I couldn't look at myself. Not in the mirror. Not in the hallway reflection. Not even in my own mind. I kept telling myself that nothing really happened. That we didn't do anything. No words were spoken that couldn't be taken back. No lines were physically crossed. Not fully. But it didn't matter. Because something had happened. And we both knew it. The silence between us was no longer the safe kind. It was suffocating. Heavy. Unbearable. I started avoiding him. Taking longer in my room. Leaving the kitchen when I heard him coming. Finding chores that didn't need doing, just to stay in motion. I thought maybe if I stayed busy enough, the guilt would evaporate. That if I just kept moving, I wouldn't feel the way my stomach twisted when I thought of the look in his eyes, the softness in his voice. The way we hovered on the edge of something we both wanted and feared. But every time I turned around, he was there. Not saying anything. Just watching. Not in a creepy way. Not with intent. Just. Too long. Too quiet. And every time our eyes met, I had to look away. I felt like I was unraveling. Like threads were being pulled from the inside, slowly, one by one. And I couldn't stop it. Guilt wrapped around everything. Making coffee? Guilt. Folding his laundry? Guilt. Laughing at something on the TV when he walked in the room? Guilt. It seeped into every corner of my day. Even in moments when I wasn't thinking about him, suddenly I was. Without warning. And the worst part? I didn't even know what I was guilty of. Of wanting? Of being seen? Of not stopping something that never fully started? My husband noticed. Not in the way I wanted him to. Not with curiosity or concern. But with brief, half-hearted remarks. "You're quiet lately. You okay?" Then, right back to his laptop. His phone. His meetings. His silence. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "I'm not okay. I'm breaking. I'm being torn in half and you haven't even noticed." But I didn't. Because I knew what would happen. He'd nod. Offer some generic line like, "Maybe you need a spa day." Then he'd disappear again. That's the thing about loneliness. It doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes, it's sleeping next to someone every night who never really sees you. A few days passed. I stayed quiet. Ethan stayed, still. Until one afternoon, I found something on my nightstand. A folded piece of notebook paper. No envelope. No signature. Just a few lines written in his handwriting. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line." But I meant everything I said. I stared at it for what felt like hours. My hands trembling. I should have torn it up. Should have thrown it out. Should have burned it. But I didn't. I folded it back the same way I found it. Tucked it into the drawer beneath my old scarves. Pressed it between fabric I never touched.